What happens when a global pop icon known for his calm demeanor and poetic silence sits across from a legendary talk show host who never shies away from blunt questions? And neither of them backs down. Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. Whoopi leans back in her chair as the applause dies down, still smiling but already scanning Kim Taehyung's face like she's deciding where to start. The audience is buzzing in that low, anticipatory way, especially the younger fans clustered near the front who've been cheering a little louder than usual. Taehyung sits upright, hands folded loosely in his lap, posture polite, expression calm but alert. He's wearing something understated, nothing flashy, and he nods once as Whoopi welcomes him again, as if acknowledging both her and the room. Whoopi starts warmly, talking about his music, his acting, the global reach of BTS, all the expected ground. Taehyung answers carefully, choosing words slowly in English, smiling shyly at first. The other hosts chime in with compliments, light jokes, a little laughter. The audience relaxes. This feels safe, familiar, almost too smooth. Then Whoopi tilts her head slightly and says his name again, slower this time. "You've got one of the biggest fan bases in the world," she says. "They're loyal, they're passionate, and sometimes they're intense." There's a ripple of laughter from the audience. Taehyung smiles, but it doesn't quite reach his eyes. He nods once. Whoopi continues. "You've seen the headlines. Fans clashing online, attacking critics, even going after interviewers sometimes. Do you feel responsible for that behavior?" The room shifts. You can feel it. One of the co-hosts glances sideways at Whoopi. Another adjusts her papers. The applause sign stays dark. Taehyung pauses longer than before. He inhales, then speaks carefully. "I feel responsible to speak honestly," he says. "But I don't control people." Whoopi doesn't let the moment breathe. "But you influence them," she says, leaning forward now. "When you say something, millions listen. When you stay silent, millions interpret that too." There's a soft oh from somewhere in the audience. Taehyung's jaw tightens just a little. He keeps his voice even. "Influence is not ownership," he replies. "Fans are people. They make their own choices." Whoopi raises her eyebrows. "Sure," she says, "but when those choices hurt other people, don't you think saying nothing can feel like approval?" The audience murmurs. A few claps, quickly stopped by others. Taehyung shifts in his seat. This is no longer a promotional interview, and everyone knows it. "I don't agree," he says more firmly now. "Silence is not always approval. Sometimes it's restraint." One of the co-hosts jumps in, trying to soften things. "I think what Whoopi's asking is whether there's a balance." Whoopi cuts in without looking away from Taehyung. "No, I want to hear his answer." Taehyung nods, a polite gesture that still reads as resolve. "In my culture," he says, "we are taught that words carry weight. Speaking without care can make things worse." Whoopi exhales sharply, not angry, but clearly unconvinced. "But you live here too," she says. "You work in this industry. And here, people expect accountability." The word hangs in the air. Accountability. The audience reacts again, louder this time, split between applause and uneasy shifting. Taehyung's expression changes. It's subtle, but it's there. Less smile. More direct eye contact. "Accountability should be fair," he says. "Not selective." Whoopi blinks. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," Taehyung continues, "that artists from my background are often asked to answer for millions of people, while others are not." A few gasps. One co-host mouths, "Wow," under her breath. The audience claps, then stops, unsure if they're allowed to. Whoopi straightens in her chair. "You think this is about where you're from?" "I think it's about expectations," Taehyung replies. "And who they're placed on." There's a beat of silence. Even the cameras seem to hesitate. Whoopi lets out a short laugh, but it's not light. "I've been doing this a long time," she says. "I ask everyone tough questions." "I know," Taehyung says. "And I respect that. But tough questions should also allow complex answers." The tension is undeniable now. One of the co-hosts tries again to step in. "I think what Taehyung is saying." Whoopi holds up a hand. "No, let him finish." Taehyung nods appreciatively, then looks back at Whoopi. "When fans act badly," he says, "it hurts me too. But asking me to police emotions across the world is unrealistic." The audience applauds this time, louder, more confident. Whoopi waits it out, her face serious. "So what do you do?" she asks when it quiets. "Just accept it?" "I speak when it matters," Taehyung says. "And I don't perform apologies to satisfy headlines." That line lands hard. A few people stand briefly, clapping. Others look shocked. One co-host shifts uncomfortably. Whoopi leans back again, crossing her arms. That sounds like a dodge, she says plainly. Taehyung doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't laugh it off. It sounds like boundaries, he responds. The audience reacts instantly, a mix of cheers and sharp inhales. Someone in the crowd shouts his name before being hushed. Whoopi's expression tightens. Boundaries are fine, she says. But public figures don't get to opt out of responsibility. And interviewers, Taehyung replies gently, don't get to define responsibility alone. That's it. That's the moment. The room feels like it's holding its breath. One of the co-hosts puts a hand to her chest. Another looks straight into the camera, eyes wide. Whoopi stares at him for a long second, then lets out a slow breath. You're pushing back, she says. Yes, Taehyung replies. Respectfully. The audience erupts, louder than before, applause rolling across the studio. Whoopi nods, acknowledging it, but her face shows she's not done. We'll talk more about that, she says, turning slightly toward the camera as the applause continues. Because this isn't just about fans. It's about power, voice, and who gets questioned. Taehyung sits back, hands clasped again, expression calm but eyes still intense. The conversation has shifted, and everyone knows it. The easy part is over. The applause fades, but the energy doesn't settle. If anything, it sharpens. Whoopi turns fully back toward Taehyung, her body language signaling that this isn't moving on, it's going deeper. One of the co-hosts tries to smile, but it looks strained, like she's bracing for impact. So let's talk about power, Whoopi says, her voice steady but firm. Because you have it, whether you asked for it or not. Taehyung nods once. I agree. And with power, Whoopi continues, comes responsibility. That's not an American idea. That's a human one. There's scattered applause. Taehyung waits for it to die down before responding. Responsibility doesn't mean obedience, he says. A few audience members react immediately, some clapping, some audibly murmuring. One co-host leans forward. Can you explain what you mean by that? Before Taehyung can answer, Whoopi interjects. Because it sounds like you're saying you decide when you're accountable. Taehyung turns his head slightly toward her, maintaining eye contact. No, he says calmly. I'm saying accountability should not be demanded only when it's convenient for others. The room hums. The audience is fully engaged now, heads nodding, hands clasped, phones discreetly lowered by ushers. This is no longer background television. Whoopi tilts her head. Convenient for who? For media, Taehyung replies without hesitation. For outrage cycles. For moments that trend. There's an audible reaction, half shock, half approval. One of the co-hosts lets out a quiet laugh of disbelief. Wow, Whoopi doesn't smile. So you think we're chasing outrage right now? I think, Taehyung says carefully, that sometimes hard questions are asked less to understand and more to provoke. A co-host jumps in quickly. But that's literally our job, to provoke discussion. And discussion is good, Taehyung says. But discussion is different from accusation. That lands heavy. The audience claps again, louder this time. Whoopi holds up a hand, letting it run its course, then lowers it slowly. Let me be very clear, she says. I'm not accusing you of anything. Taehyung nods. I didn't say you were. Whoopi pauses, then exhales through her nose. You're good, she says, half smiling, half challenging. You're very good. Some laughter breaks out, easing the tension for about half a second. Taehyung smiles politely, but he doesn't relax. One of the co-hosts tries to steer the conversation. I think what's fascinating here is the cultural difference in how public figures are expected to respond. Whoopi cuts in again, eyes still on Taehyung. But culture doesn't excuse silence. The smile fades from Taehyung's face completely now. Not angry, just serious. Silence is not absence, he says. Sometimes it's listening. The audience reacts with a low MMM, like a collective processing of the statement. A woman in the front row nods vigorously. Whoopi shakes her head slightly. But when people are being hurt, people are always being hurt, Taehyung interrupts gently but clearly. The interruption itself causes a stir. It's subtle, but it's there. Every day. By many things. If I speak on one issue, I'm asked why I didn't speak on another. One co-host leans back, eyes wide. That's true. Whoopi presses on. But you can't deny that when your fans attack someone and you say nothing, it sends a message. Taehyung takes a breath. You can see him choosing his words. It sends many messages, he says. And people choose the one that fits their narrative. The audience claps again, mixed with a few boos this time. The division is clear. Whoopi notices it and gestures toward the crowd. See that, she says. That reaction right there. That's why this matters. Taehyung looks out briefly at the audience, then back to Whoopi. Yes, he says. And that reaction is not mine to control. There's a beat. The co-host on Whoopi's right shifts uncomfortably. Do you ever worry, she asks Taehyung, that pushing back like this might disappoint some fans? Taehyung smiles softly. I worry more about disappointing myself. That gets a strong reaction, applause, cheers, even a couple of people standing before sitting back down. Whoopi lets the moment breathe, then leans forward again. You're very composed, she says. But let me ask you something personal. Do you ever feel afraid to speak because of backlash? The question hangs in the air. This time, Taehyung doesn't answer immediately. The studio is quiet enough that you can hear someone cough in the back. Yes, he says finally. Of course. The honesty shifts the tone slightly. Even Whoopi's expression softens for a moment. So isn't that exactly why your voice matters? She asks. Taehyung nods. Yes, which is why I use it carefully. Whoopi sighs, rubbing her temple. But careful can look like avoidance. And loud can look like performance, Taehyung replies. The audience erupts again. This time it's louder, more chaotic. Whoopi laughs despite herself, shaking her head. Okay, she says. Okay. One of the co-hosts claps lightly. This is intense, she says, half to the camera. Whoopi turns briefly toward the audience. You see why we wanted him here, she says, then back to Taehyung. You're challenging the premise. I respect the platform, Taehyung says. That's why I'm honest. Whoopi studies him for a long moment. You know, she says slowly, some people watching this are going to say you're dodging. I know, Taehyung replies. And some will say I'm standing my ground. Are you okay with that? Whoopi asks. Taehyung nods without hesitation. I can't control interpretation. Only intention. The audience claps again, though more measured now, like they're weighing every word. Whoopi leans back in her chair, crossing her arms once more. You're not giving an inch, she says. Taehyung smiles faintly. Neither are you. That gets laughter from the co-hosts and the audience. The tension doesn't disappear, but it transforms, less confrontational, more electric. Whoopi chuckles, then looks straight into the camera. We're going to take a quick break, she says. But when we come back, we're not done. Because this conversation about voice, influence, and responsibility is far from over. The camera pulls back slightly as the audience applauds, some still talking among themselves, others shaking their heads or smiling in disbelief. Taehyung takes a sip of water, his expression composed but thoughtful. Whoopi adjusts her glasses, already preparing her next move. Whatever happens next, everyone can feel it, the calm before an even bigger storm. The applause coming out of the break is louder than before, sharper, like the audience knows they're stepping back into something unresolved. Whoopi nods at the crowd, then turns immediately to Taehyung, skipping any light re-entry. The tension hasn't cooled during the commercials. It's just been contained. We're back, Whoopi says, her tone direct. And I want to pick up right where we left off. Taehyung inclines his head slightly. Of course. One of the co-hosts exhales audibly, half smiling. No easing in, she mutters, and the audience laughs briefly. Whoopi doesn't. You said something before the break, she says, that a lot of people are going to replay. Loud can look like performance. What did you mean by that? Taehyung doesn't hesitate this time. I mean that sometimes people speak not to solve something, but to be seen speaking. A ripple runs through the studio. A few claps break out before stopping themselves. Whoopi's eyes narrow, not angrily, but with focus. So are you saying when public figures apologize or comment, they're being fake? She asks. I'm saying some are, Taehyung replies. And some aren't. But the pressure to speak immediately often creates empty words. One of the co-hosts leans forward. But isn't something better than nothing when harm is happening? Not if it's dishonest, Taehyung says quietly. The audience reacts strongly, applause, murmurs, a couple of people shaking their heads. Whoopi lifts a hand to quiet them. But honesty, Whoopi says, isn't always comfortable. Taehyung nods. Neither is restraint. Whoopi pauses, then gives a short, thoughtful nod. Fair. That acknowledgement surprises the room. The co-hosts glance at each other. The audience settles, curious. Let me ask you this, Whoopi continues. Do you think Western media misunderstands you? Taehyung considers the question. Sometimes, he says. But misunderstanding goes both ways. Explain. One of the co-hosts says quickly, eager to keep him talking. I grew up in a culture where humility is expected, Taehyung says. Where drawing attention to yourself, even to apologize, can feel self-centered. The audience hums thoughtfully. Whoopi listens closely now, chin resting briefly on her hand. But you're not in that system anymore, Whoopi says. You're a global celebrity. I live in both, Taehyung replies. That's the tension. A co-host nods slowly. That actually makes sense. Whoopi shifts in her chair. But when fans cross lines, real lines, harassment, threats, don't you feel a moral obligation to say, stop? Taehyung's expression hardens slightly. I have, he says. Whoopi raises her eyebrows. Have you? Yes, Taehyung says, a little firmer now. Multiple times. Privately. Publicly. But those moments don't trend. There's a murmur of surprise. One co-host looks toward Whoopi. I didn't know that. Because it's not amplified, Taehyung continues. Calm statements don't travel as far as conflict. The audience applauds, this time with more understanding than defiance. Whoopi exhales slowly. So what you're saying, she says, is that you're being judged not by what you do, but by how loudly it's seen. Yes, Taehyung replies. Whoopi nods, then leans forward again. But do you understand why people want more from you? I do, Taehyung says. And I carry that weight. The sincerity in his voice changes the atmosphere again. One of the co-hosts softens visibly. That's a lot, she says quietly. Whoopi studies him. You don't look angry, she says. I'm not, Taehyung replies. I'm tired. That word hits differently. The audience reacts with a sympathetic, ah, followed by gentle applause. Whoopi's face shifts, less confrontational, more human. Tired of what? She asks. Tired of being treated as a symbol instead of a person, Taehyung says. A representative. A spokesperson. I'm an artist. The audience claps again, louder now, many clearly on his side. Whoopi lets it go longer this time. But symbols matter, she says when it quiets. Whether you like it or not. I know, Taehyung responds. But symbols also break. There's a brief silence. One of the co-hosts presses her lips together, visibly moved. Whoopi clears her throat. Do you think you're being unfairly targeted? She asks. Yes, Taehyung says, without hesitation. The bluntness causes a stir. Whoopi nods slowly. That's honest. I try to be, Taehyung says. One of the co-hosts interjects. Do you feel like you're expected to be perfect? Taehyung laughs softly for the first time in a while. Yes, he says. And perfect people don't exist. The audience laughs with him, easing the tension just a bit. Whoopi smiles faintly. You're challenging a lot of assumptions today. I think they need to be challenged, Taehyung replies. Whoopi looks out at the audience. Some of you agree, she says. Some of you don't. The audience reacts. Cheers and murmurs mix together. She turns back to Taehyung. But here's the thing. When you push back like this, people will say you're being defensive. Taehyung nods. And when I don't, they say I don't care. So what's the solution? Whoopi asks. There isn't a perfect one, Taehyung says. There's only honesty and limits. The audience applauds again, steady and strong. Whoopi leans back, uncrossing her arms. You know, she says slowly, I don't agree with everything you're saying. I didn't expect you to, Taehyung replies. But I respect that you're saying it, Whoopi continues. Taehyung bows his head slightly. Thank you. One of the co-hosts smiles. This is why live TV matters, she says. Whoopi nods, then glances at the clock. We've got a few minutes left, she says. And I want to end this right. She turns to Taehyung again. If there's one thing you wish people understood about you after today, what is it? Taehyung takes a breath, looking briefly out at the audience before answering. That I'm listening, he says. Even when I'm quiet. The audience applauds, not explosively, but deeply. Whoopi nods, absorbing the answer. And that, she says, is something we're all still learning to do. The camera lingers as the applause continues, the tension no longer sharp but unresolved, thoughtful. The conversation hasn't ended. It's transformed into something heavier, more reflective. And everyone knows the final moments are going to matter. The applause tapers off slowly, not because people aren't engaged, but because they're processing. Whoopi waits, hands folded on the table, eyes still on Taehyung. When the room finally quiets, she nods once, like she's acknowledging that something real just happened. You know, she says, her voice lower now, less confrontational than before. This is one of those conversations people are going to argue about all night. The audience reacts immediately, laughter, clapping, a few knowing shouts. Taehyung smiles faintly, but there's a tiredness behind it. That's okay, he says. Conversation is better than assumptions. One of the co-hosts leans in. Do you realize, she says, that what you just said is going to be clipped, slowed down, analyzed, and reposted 1,000 different ways? Taehyung nods. I do. And you're still okay with how you said it? Whoopi asks. Yes, he replies without pause. That confidence draws another wave of applause. Whoopi looks out at the audience, then back at him. I don't agree with you on everything, she repeats. But I don't think you came here to be comfortable. No, Taehyung says. I came to be honest. Whoopi lets out a short laugh. Mission accomplished. The audience laughs with her, the tension easing just a little. One of the co-hosts adds, I think people forget how rare that is on live TV. Whoopi nods. Especially when the stakes are this high. She turns back to Taehyung. Before we wrap, is there anything you want to say directly to your fans watching right now? The audience quiets instantly. This feels important. Taehyung takes a breath. I want them to know I appreciate their love, he says. But I also trust them to think for themselves. A few people in the audience clap softly. Others nod. Whoopi watches him closely. And to the critics? She asks. Taehyung doesn't smile this time. I'm listening, he says again. But listening doesn't mean surrendering who I am. That line hits hard. The audience applauds loudly, some standing briefly. Whoopi waits it out, then nods with a thoughtful expression. Well, she says, this has been one of the most intense conversations we've had in a while. One of the co-hosts laughs. Understatement. Whoopi smiles, then looks directly into the camera. Kim Taehyung, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me, he replies, bowing his head slightly. The applause swells as the camera widens. Taehyung relaxes back into his chair, shoulders finally dropping just a little. Whoopi adjusts her glasses, exchanging quick looks with the other hosts. You can tell they know this segment isn't going to end when the camera's cut. As the show signs off and the applause continues, the audience energy is electric. People talking over one another, some clearly emotional, others animated, debating even as they clap. A few fans near the front wipe their eyes. Others shake their heads, already rehearsing arguments in their minds. Once the cameras stop rolling, staff members move in. Whoopi leans toward Taehyung and says something off mic. He listens, nods, responds quietly. Whatever it is, it's calm. Respectful. There's no explosion backstage, no dramatic walk-off. Just two people who challenged each other and didn't flinch. Within minutes, phones light up. Clips of the exchange hit social media before the episode even finishes airing in some regions. Short videos titled Taehyung Stands His Ground and Whoopi Pushes Back start trending. Fans flood the comments, some praising his composure, calling him articulate, mature, fearless. Others argue he dodged responsibility, that he should have been more direct. The split is immediate and intense. On X, his name climbs the trending list. On TikTok, slowed-down edits of his answers rack up millions of views. One clip, him saying silence is not absence, gets reposted everywhere, stitched with reactions ranging from tears to outrage. Comment sections turn into battlegrounds. Some longtime viewers of the show defend Whoopi, saying she asked what needed to be asked, that accountability matters. Others accuse her of pushing too hard, of holding him to a different standard. Think pieces start popping up within hours, analyzing cultural expectations, celebrity responsibility, and why this conversation struck such a nerve. Entertainment outlets run headlines like, Tense Exchange Leaves Audience Divided and Unexpected Clash Sparks Global Debate. Fan accounts release full transcripts, highlighting every interruption, every pause, every shift in tone. Body language experts weigh in. Media critics dissect the power dynamics. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, producers quietly acknowledge what everyone else already knows. The segment pulled massive engagement. Higher than average live reactions. Record clip shares. A surge in online discussion. Whether people loved it or hated it, they watched. By the next morning, Whoopi addresses it briefly at the top of the show. Not defensively. Not apologetically. Just directly. She says conversations like that are why the show exists. That disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. That live television should challenge people. Taehyung doesn't issue a statement. No long post. No clarifying thread. Fans debate that choice endlessly, some praising it as consistent with what he said on air, others wishing he'd add more. But those who watched closely understand that silence, this time, is deliberate. Industry insiders quietly praise how he handled it. Calm. Grounded. Unshaken. Not confrontational, but not submissive either. A rare balance. And the audience? They keep talking. Days later, the segment is still circulating, still debated, still referenced whenever conversations about celebrity responsibility come up. It becomes one of those moments people say, "Did you see that interview?" and immediately know what you mean. Not because someone yelled, not because someone stormed off, but because neither side backed down and both were heard. And now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Kim Taehyung right to stand his ground, or should he have said more? Was Whoopi asking necessary questions or pushing too far? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.